you know, I think it's going to be a short stream. It might be a quiet stream. Not really sure. Haven't really figured out within myself if I'm going to be talking a lot or if I'm going to be mostly thinking. But I will be talking a little bit at least. And what I'm going to be talking about is art appreciation. Some art appreciation. I had I recently watched an anime called Pluto, and I liked it. I kind of liked it. The way that I felt about it is why I'm talking about it on this stream. But I kind of liked it, and I've been telling my friends about it. And the way that I've been talking about it has been revealing some things about myself that I want to get into. The Pluto is this really cool anime. It's so cool. It's like a detective sci-fi anime. It's very interesting. I'm not much of an anime person, personally, generally speaking. I don't really like anime or watch it a lot. Or before I get too far into the anime stuff. I'm about to drink some tea. This one's called a Shui Jin Gui. Aged oolong. Roasted 10 years ago. That's what I'm drinking today. So this anime, I was watching this anime. It's really cool. I really liked it. Oh, well, at least I liked it when I started watching it, and I kind of liked it when I ended watching it. Kind of liked it. I kind of liked it. I wasn't really a big fan. Hold on, I'm changing something over here. Essentially, I was telling my friends that I was very hype about the anime when it started because I was extremely hype about the anime. The way that it introduced certain characters and certain mechanics was just amazing to me. So I was pretty into it. But then there was a lot of things that were not fleshed out in ways that I like, that I would have wanted. And so I was telling my friends that I was disappointed. And then I started to realize something that essentially the future of the way that we interact with art and appreciate art, it's going to be a little bit different because of how much the way that we have so much availability to customize things. That's a part of it, but really it's more so the ease in which we can fix things that we think are not appropriate. What does the word fix mean? Doesn't it mean like to keep something stable? Anyway, fix something we don't like will be something that's very easy at some point in the future. And I essentially want to prepare for that. Now, I don't even think it needs to be prepared for. I mean, I don't even think it's far in the future. I don't even think it's in the future. I think this is in the past even. It, there, it's always been available for a person to view a work of art and then edit it and make it better or make it to their own specifications. It's always been available for somebody to see a work of art, see certain flaws into it, or see that it doesn't fit in a particular medium, and then just translate it into whatever other medium that they want, or fix the flaws. So it's something that's always been available, and it's something I've actually done myself a little bit. Well, it smells good. It smells like peppermint or something. It also smells like a really nice rock oolong. So I don't know what kind of tea it is. It is from a Wuyi farmer. So I imagine it's a rock oolong. It's got the strip rolled. Very minerally, with a nice, there's like a bitterness that's pleasant and cooling feeling. Anyway, not the focus of the stream. And I'm sure I could do a lot more to make it better because it's not great at the moment. It's just a rinse anyway. Okay, so I think that it's always been a possibility for us to improve a work of art. So let's say in the future, let's just give an idea of what will happen in the future. You watch something, right? The whole point of, for example, Stable Diffusion, if we all know this, the person who made Stable Diffusion, EMAD, has talked publicly about him wanting to have made Stable Diffusion so that he could fix Game of Thrones and the ending of Game of Thrones, and be able to make a video, like text prompt video, to immediately create something that would be a good ending, not a fumbled ending. So that's kind of the idea of the future. And this is a very, this is a new tea to me. This is something I've never not had before. I don't know if I've had this type of tea either. I've had many aged oolongs, but I don't think I've had an aged rock oolong. And I've got some notes on how often it was roasted and all that stuff. It's like mineral fudge ice cream. Very strange. And the aftertaste is just great. So, I was saying something about something, I don't know what. Stable Diffusion, EMAD, he, part of his publicly stated reasons for creating Stable Diffusion, which is a image generation AI thing, it also does videos now, was to create a better ending of Game of Thrones. Have the ability to do that. He's no longer the CEO or whatever, but he's the creator of Stable Diffusion. So I think that will be something that will be available in the future. That will be like a standard type of thing where we can curate a work of art to fit our tastes. And I think that would be great. That'd be cool. I like the idea. However, this is already in existence. You can take any work of art and you can just make it your own. You can improve it, you can add things to it, you can cut things out of it, you can translate it, you can make a book, you can turn the movie into a book, and so on. I've done this a few times before, very like minor versions of this, where I've taken a scene of a movie and turned it into written text and edited the sequence of events to fit how I thought it would be better. In particular, there's this scene in the movie Stalker. There's a movie called Stalker by Tarkovsky. Amazing movie, my favorite movie. I absolutely love this movie. It's very bizarre. It's very strange. There's this one scene where there's a group of three guys and they walk into a room of sand dunes, and there's a bird that flies, and then it starts flying. I think it flies in one direction, and then there's like a cut, like a cut in the like a jump cut, and the bird goes back, and it flies in a different direction. It's very strange. Anyway, that's not the important part that I'm thinking about. They walk into this room of sand dunes, and then there's a well in the middle of this room. And one of the guys, he's a writer. He walks up to the well. He looks down. He's kind of like contemplating jumping into the well. I don't know if that's actually true, if I just misremembering that, or if I'm inserting my own. Anyway, he's looking down this well, contemplating jumping into it, and he picks up a rock that's nearby, and he drops it. And he looks down the well, and the shot is just like him looking down the well, and the camera zooms into him as he's looking down the well. And then he looks up at the camera and gives a speech to the camera before there's a rock falling down a well, and you don't hear anything. It doesn't hit the bottom. It's like 10 seconds. It's like a very long, awkward amount of time where you're just like waiting for something to happen because he's looking down, the camera's zooming in, and then he looks up, he starts giving the speech. And that to me was, I just liked it. There's something about it that I liked. There's a lot in this movie that I like. And at some point during the speech, there is an impact. You do hear a sound of something hitting something else. And it sounds like it could possibly perhaps be a rock hitting the bottom of a well and splashing in water. It seems like that maybe for like a second. But then the sound of it reverberates and it starts to change and it becomes very strange and weird. And then it becomes obvious that there's no way that it's not that sound. It's not the sound of a rock hitting the bottom of a well. Anyway, for me and for my taste, I always thought that the sound of the impact did not hit at the right time. It didn't align with something that he was saying in the speech. I felt that the impact should have aligned with one of the words that he was saying in the speech. So I just wrote the scene to have that happen. In any case, I'm going off too off base, maybe not giving the foundation and structure here to start. So I told my friends that I thought that I felt disappointed from watching the ending of Pluto, and that reverberated within me and seemed to highlight certain aspects of my own instinctual thinking. And I quickly pinpointed it, and I identified it as being pessimistic in nature, as being defeatist in nature, and as being anti-human in nature. And there are other things, I'm sure, but that's just what stood out to me immediately. Pessimistic because, of course, I wasn't imagining that somebody could fix it. And it's very appropriate that I had this feeling to the show Pluto, anime, because Pluto is a revamp, it is a reimagining of something called Astro Boy. Astro Boy is this old anime. It's probably the first anime. You might want to call it the first anime. I don't know. I've not done the research here, but I've always thought of it as the first anime. It kind of started the tradition of what we consider modern anime now. And there was a particular story arc about it, whatever. And that story arc was reimagined into what is called Pluto, and Pluto is a modern thing. It was made last year, 2 years ago, 2023, and I think Astro Boy was made in the 70s or the 80s. So we have this Pluto, which is a reimagining of something that's really old, and modernizing it and making it more appropriate to the times and adding new language to it and so on and so forth. It's really cool. And I imagine the person who made Pluto didn't look at Astro Boy and say that the author of Astro Boy, who I don't know his name, I don't remember his name, he didn't say that he fumbled it. He didn't say that he messed it up. He saw the things that he liked, appreciated those, highlighted those, and then added his own thing towards it. He became a part of the work of art. More of that sense of belonging stuff too that we've talked about before. So I'd like to think more in those ways, being able to improve a work of art. Which that covers the pessimism and defeatism, right? He's pessimistic because I just think of it as bad and kind of only highlighting the bad stuff and not imagining that it could be fixed. Not imagining defeatist because I'm not imagining myself as being a part of the work and being able to improve upon it, or being able to improve upon a derivative work. It's also anti-human because I'm not even appreciating the parts of the work that he's doing. Like he's doing some things in the work. The Pluto, the anime. I'm gonna talk a little bit about some of the ending. Uh, it's fantastic. It starts amazing, detective anime, great, cool stuff, interesting things. Once it gets towards the end, it kind of devolves into anime tropes, and this is why I mentioned earlier I don't like anime. I'm not a fan of anime generally speaking, so I don't really like anime like typical anime tropes. And it goes into all the worst anime tropes. One of them being that everything becomes apocalyptic, and it's like now they're trying to save the world. Another thing is they start to do this unnecessary, like ungodly amount of exposition where people are just sitting down and talking and telling the story, telling the plot, as opposed to having any way of like showing the plot in anything other than just like sitting down and telling you. Now, throughout the whole rest of the story, there are a lot of areas where the plot is just revealed through imagery, and it's beautiful, it's amazing. But then, literally, the last two episodes, there are a couple places where people are sitting down and just telling the plot. Not so good. Not so good. And it's not so good. It's just not good to me. And then a lot of the plot points just kind of fall apart. Things don't make any sense. Things are not aligning. There a lot of the rules that have been set out just don't follow anymore. Everything just kind of falls apart. Not a fan. And also, a lot of the character designs get revealed. Some of the designs get revealed, and they're very weird. They're like weird, as in, again, I'm not an anime fan, so I don't like them. But I think that they're very similar to an 80s anime. So they're like similar to the original Astro Boy. So, somebody who likes anime or somebody who likes Astro Boy will probably like that a lot and think it's a cool, interesting nod to the original. For me, not so much. I didn't like it. So there are all those things that are happening towards the ending of this anime. And I at some point I thought about it, and it kind of dawned on me in a way that the beginning is very like it's set up as a kind of a standard narrative. You know, it's a narrative, and a lot of the plot points are pretty intricately intertwined, and a lot of the mechanisms of the plot seem to be a lot of the mechanisms of the world seem to be relevant to the plot, and so on. So there's a lot of that it's like meticulously, it seems meticulously interwoven, and it's very cool, and I'd like to go along for that ride. And then at some point it seems to switch, and it just becomes like vibes, vague vibes, and anime tropes, which I think I could like vague vibes and anime tropes. I do like movies that are just like pure vibes. I just described a movie earlier, Stalker. This movie is just all vibes. It's very strange. Uh, I don't know if there are any rules that are set up in the movie that actually pay off in the movie or make any sense in the movie. It's just all vibes. Same as like if you think about a Studio Ghibli movie, it's all vibes. The plot is like super secondary, maybe tertiary, maybe even quaternary or whatever. The next, there it's like plot is so totally not relevant. What most matters most is the vibes. Same thing with like Stanley Kubrick films. Vibes are more important than the plot. And that's cool. I do like that. I do like that. I like that in a lot of context. I didn't like it in Pluto. I didn't like the switch. I didn't like the whiplash of thinking that it was a plot driven and had these interesting narrative threads that were going to be concluded, and then be switched over to this pure vibes. But anyway, the anti-humanist aspect here is me not appreciating whatever the let me look up the name of the artist. Not appreciating what he was telling, not appreciating his story and the way that he wanted to tell the story. Because somebody could just have a regular narrative and then switch over to vibes, and that's cool. Another movie is called Downsizing. Oh my god, that movie was hilarious. I love this movie. It's called Downsizing. Pure vibes. Pure, just absolute vibes. Story, narrative, non-plot, doesn't matter. Mechanisms and consistency, and none of that matters. All vibes. But for me, there was never a point in those movies where I thought it would be a regular movie or a regular narrative. It's created by Urasawa. That's the guy's name. Not making any sense yet. All this has just been on my mind. And I've been thinking about what approach to appreciating art I do have, generally. I have, uh, well, in this case, not embodied, but I have in my mind, kind of my thoughts. And I think some of them will be more common in the future. So the first one, of course, is what I've been talking about. That a work of art can be improved. It can be improved by you. It can be improved by other people. So you can have a piece, a work, a theme. It doesn't really matter what it is. Anything can be art, beauty of some sort, can be presented, and then it can be improved upon in some way. it's possible to improve upon it. Not necessarily that you would have to, not necessarily that you would want to at all points, but that it is possible. So if a work of art, in the case that we're talking about here, doesn't appropriately match my tastes, I could make it match my tastes. I could make a derivative work that matched my tastes, for example. Either a derivative or just improving the work. You know, both options are available. So in the same way, for example, I write a lot of piano music. If I play piano music, if I write it, if I experience any part of it that I don't like, I just improve it. And now the work of art has been improved. I do it all the time. And that will be available for all works of art, I think, at some point. And I like the idea of also derivatives. I haven't really formed my thoughts fully on the derivative art. I think derivative arts often get derided. Is that the right word? People don't like derivative arts. For whatever reason, people don't like derivative arts. But I like it for two reasons. Two reasons I like derivative arts. First one is that it highlights what is good about the original. Right? If you have a derivative, generally it keeps parts of the original, and whatever those parts are, you can hone your appreciation of so that you can appreciate them more in the original. You're honing your skills for appreciating the work. I like a lot. I like a lot. Second thing is there are just some works that elaborate on certain things, and it can elaborate on them sloppily, it can elaborate on them poorly, and that's totally fine. Especially for genres that I like. So this is one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier I don't like anime. I just don't watch a lot of anime, and if I were to watch something that is a mediocre anime, I wouldn't want to watch it. I wouldn't want to watch. If you just give me the greatest anime of all times, maybe I'll definitely like to watch those types of things. If we're watching Akira, all right, I'm going to be enjoying that. Definitely, it's fantastic, it's amazing. But whatever new seasonal thing, I'm not going to be a fan of. But that's different for example, for radio show. I like old radio shows from the 40s, 50s, 60s, old radio shows. And these are just people talking. They're like podcasts, narrative podcasts. It's one way of thinking about it. Old radio shows. I like them. I like the best ones. I like the worst ones. I like the mediocre ones. I just like it. I like the genre. So because I like the genre, I want to hear the best ones. And then I want to hear all of the mediocre ones that are trying to copy the best ones. And they're doing it really poorly and sloppily. I don't care. I want to watch it. I mean, I want to listen to it. I just like it. It's the thing that I'm into that genre, so I want to appreciate more of that genre in all the forms of it, good and bad. I like classical music. I really like listening to Brahms. I also really like listening to other late romantic composers that are trying to copy Brahms. I don't care if they're not as good as Brahms. I want to hear it. I want to hear all of the derivative works. And the derivative work is almost it's like a form of appreciation. It's a form of analysis of the work that it is derived from, right? Because again, it's highlighting parts that the artist of the derivative likes of the original. I just like that. That's cool to me. Another thing is the humanistic, the language here around the language that I'm thinking of here is just not quite fleshed out. I've been thinking about this for a day. It's not quite fleshed out, but there are the ideas of people are creative and have interesting and creative and artistic and beautiful things to say. Whether or not I can appreciate them immediately is a different story, but people have things to say that are interesting. And so I can always assume that if I'm appreciating a work of art, that there's going to be something there for me to appreciate. I say appreciate multiple times. If I'm experiencing a work of art, there's something there for me to appreciate. This gets somewhat into the oh my gosh, the Lydian chromatic concept. Oh my gosh, I gotta think about this. But this gets a little bit into the Lydian chromatic concept of I can learn to appreciate certain things. Right, I have a range of things that I can appreciate. I have this framework of. Let me describe the Lydian chromatic concept. It might be a little bit necessary. So with the Lydian chromatic concept, it's a music theory. It's a framework for music theory, usually for jazz musicians, but it can be applied to all musicians. Essentially, a chord, which is four notes arranged a certain way, there are four notes. A chord can represent, or is, in the language of the Lydian chromatic concept, is the same as a scale, which is 7 or 8 notes. To be more concrete, just to make sure that we understand what I'm saying here, a C major seventh chord is unified, is the same thing as a scale, the C Lydian scale, for example. And it's actually there's once you see once you see the how do I describe this? I don't know how to describe it in easy to understand terms. So just to go back and say it again, you have a chord, four notes, C major 7. That would be the same as a scale, and it's called a parent Lydian chromatic scale. If I want to be super technical with the language here, the parent Lydian chromatic scale will be the C Lydian chromatic scale. And when you have the C Lydian chromatic scale, that can be broken up into smaller component scales, which are called principal scales. And there is a hierarchy of these principal scales. This is the important part, that there's a hierarchy of principal scales. So when you play the C major 7, it is associated with a particular principal Lydian scale. And within this hierarchy, it means that there's one principal scale that is most obviously implied, and there's going to be another principal scale that is less obviously implied, and there's going to be another one that's even less obviously implied, and another that's even less obviously implied, and so on and so forth. You have this range of scales that are implied from a chord. I'm saying implied. George Russell, who wrote the Lydian chromatic concept, would say that they're unified. He in fact doesn't call any of these things chords, as I'm calling it. He doesn't call them anything scale. He calls everything a chord scale mode. Mode is a whole other thing. I like the way that he thinks about it, but it's not very good for communication because no one knows what the heck any of it means. Anyway, so you have a C major chord, and that implies the C Lydian scale. That's the most obvious implication. But then you have a slightly less obvious implication, which would be the C Lydian augmented scale. And a slightly less, very less obviously implied would be the C Lydian diminished scale. And even less obviously implied would be the C Lydian dominant scale, and so on. You have like a list of all these scales that are obviously implied and less obviously implied. And then you can go further with a C major being less obvious, one of the less obvious implications would be a B flat Lydian scale or B flat Lydian augmented and so on and so forth. You get this whole network of things that are implied and things that are implied obviously and less obviously. And the order of how obvious things are implied are based on whatever your cultural context is. Also based on personal tastes, you know, you can have your own personal hierarchy if you like. And a lot of the time, if you are a jazz musician, essentially what you want to do is to give a somewhat obvious implication that the audience can appreciate and understand, and then go slightly outside, and then just expand beyond that, go for slightly further outside of that obvious implication, bringing somebody a bit far out. Language of the 60s here. You're going far out. You're moving. Another part of the language of the leading chromatic concept is that there's tonal gravity. There's gravity that's, you know, pulling you into a certain tonal center, and the further out you go, the less bound you are to that gravity. So all that is relevant because of what I'm saying about works of art. It's relevant in multiple ways, and I'm not sure which way I was talking about before. But anyway, I'm going to talk about it this way now. So any work of art could also be that any work of art could be the chord, could metaphorically be the chord that has this whole network of scales that are implied, and you as an individual have the obvious implication, and then there are many less obvious implications. So in this case, we have the work of Pluto, which, you know, you have Astro Boy, and then you have it's like Astro Boy but modernized and in a detective anime format. That's the chord, and the most obvious implication is whatever I think it is, because, you know, the obvious implication for my own framework and my own thoughts, it's whatever I think it is. But a slightly less obvious implication is what Urasawa presented to me. So he's like bringing me far out. He's widening my scope of appreciation, because he's taking the work and then going into this other part of the implications that I didn't see initially, that I didn't have available to myself. So he's presenting more to that, more of that to me, and widening my own personal scope of appreciation. Well, it gets me into Kandinsky also. A lot of very disconnected thoughts. Very pleasant. I've been recently, I'm sure I've talked about this on stream, doing some sort of slightly directed meditation in order to move the mind to being a bit more, seeing a bit more available to see connections and synchronicities, and making all these disparate things similar, seeing the possibilities with a lot of things, which is fun, and I like it. It makes me think about the Lydian chromatic concept when talking about Pluto. And I've been thinking about the Lydian chromatic concept a lot, and Kandinsky's spiritual triangle, and so on. Another principle of art appreciation. Is that the framework that I've been talking about it? I don't remember. Another principle would be that there's no limit to how much. It's not how I want to say it. It's not how I think about it. Beauty is not quantifiable. Is that how I want to say it? Something like that. What I mean is that having one form of art, Pluto, for example, with its disgustingly messy ending, that does not appeal to my taste at all. That having that exist does not override or block out the possibility for other similar works existing with much more tight-knit endings. Quantifiable, is that the right word? Meaning, what I mean is just that the room is it's big enough to, you can have a library of art, and you can fill all the walls, and at some point all the walls are filled and you need to get a new warehouse or whatever. But we're not thinking in that way. We're not thinking of it as being a finite space that can be taken. I don't know how to say that. Another thing is that it will be possible for a person to appreciate art, more art, a wider scope of art, and art in more detail. It's something that I talk about a lot. Maybe I don't talk about a lot. I think about a lot. Just generally, I want to appreciate a wider scope of art, and I also want to appreciate certain forms of art in more detail. And that's a possibility. That's a possibility. So that when I get presented something like Pluto, I can potentially learn. I can train myself. I can grow to appreciate it as it is. And another thing is just I'm gonna end on this point. Pretty much why I'm sharing it. Um, I think this is a derivative of something that I've heard from David Deutsch, or maybe something I've heard from Naval. Uh, as Naval being saying something that was a derivative of David Deutsch. I'm not sure. I'm going levels of derivative away from whatever I heard. But anyway, it's something about very similar to all the things I've been saying, but this in particular, it's about sharing ideas, and sharing ideas being an embodiment of a form of optimism, and appreciating the fact that other people can improve the idea. Other people can, well, that's the easiest way to put it. Improve the idea either by adding to it or telling you why it's wrong and having you change it. So in any case, if you believe that people can do that, then you would want to share your ideas. Same goes for art. If you think that art can be improved, then you'd want to share it so that other people can improve it, or that other people can direct you to improve it, whatever they do. And of course, I think of art analysis as a form of art, and art appreciation as a form of art, and all this stuff that I'm talking about here is some form of art. And yeah, I just want to present it, see how it lands. I don't think it's well formed at the moment, of course. Perhaps there's somebody out there who could form it, or I can just form it over time personally, and people can ask questions about it, and I can adjust based on those questions because I want to communicate it in some way. Or I can just be open about how I think and what I think about. All that, don't know what to call it. Something to do with some aspect of optimism and appreciating that other people can help. Now I just want to drink this tea for a couple minutes. So this anime is Pluto. We've been talking about Pluto. It had this really cool. It's a detective anime. It's about a detective, German detective. It's got this cool mechanic. Right? The detective is a robot, AI robot. He's a robot. And being a robot, he has detachable memory, which he can share with other robots. So there's a particular scene where the main character, his name is Gazekt, shares his memory with another character who is a secondary mainish character. His name's Atom. Atom, with a T. Atom. Gazek shares his memory with Atom for some unrelated, just for some random reason. It's not super random, it's plot relevant, but you know, some reason. And when he shares his memory with Atom, then Atom gets all of his memories. And because of that, Atom then has information about a case, like a detective, like a criminal case, or a police case. So he, on his own accord, goes to a police station and starts to investigate and help the detectives, the police, investigate this case. And it's a very interesting mechanic because then he can investigate from his own perspective. That's different from Gazette, and the people who he's investigating with. You can watch the anime; it'll be great. You'll love it. The, there's a case that happens in Germany. I believe it's in Germany, and Gazette is investigating it there, and then Gazette goes to Japan to meet Atom for some other unrelated reason. But then there's a case that happens in Japan. So when Atom gets Gazette's memory and he sees about the case that's happening in Japan, he sees that they're related, and he goes to investigate himself. Doesn't inform Gazette. Gazette doesn't know about it. Doesn't need to know about it. But since Adam has his memories, he can pick up on the investigation from where Gazette left off and share it with the police. Very, very, very cool. And there's also another cool mechanic where the police can record the crime scene, like record the details of a crime scene, and then simulate it in the police station, very with very really high fidelity, as in like they can create a like a 3D simulation that you can walk into, and it's really cool to see. Love to see it. One of those mechanics that I would have appreciated if it were more leaned into more in the anime, which it was not leaned into very much. I'm a fan of detective stories. I wonder if liking classical music is leads towards liking derivative works more. I'm saying derivative, but I don't really mean derivative in this case because it's a little different. You have a classical work; it's usually written down in sheet music as the work, but then you have many different forms and expressions of that same work. Some of them are they're different. Yeah, some are better than others, and they all have different flares. It highlights certain different aspects of it. I'm, I think it's pretty well. I think it's commonplace for a person to, if you're going to go to a symphony, for example, to then listen to several recordings of the symphony before you go to the symphony. Am I making sense here? You'd want to, if you want to go listen to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, amazing symphony. You'd want to listen to many recordings of that symphony before you go to a live performance of it to become familiar with it. Now, of course, if you like classical music, you're probably already familiar with the Fifth Symphony. But you get the picture. You want to listen to some, you want to be familiar with it before you go to see how it's being fully expressed. The question I'm having is, would I call that a derivative or not? I really like listening to the same song being recorded by many different artists. I don't know if that's a very common thing. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up. It's been fun. I'll be back. we'll talk about this stuff again. Presumably more structured. At some point it'll get structured. You know, I don't know. I've been talking about similar things for a while. Hasn't been structured yet. Maybe it won't ever get structured, but eventually it'll be structured, I'm sure. I'm sure. Maybe. If I can contort my mind in a particular way to be able to structure my thoughts and have them be presentable, it may happen, it may not happen. There are a lot of subjects I can have pretty structured thinking with, but then I get excited about other subjects. The thinking gets a little bit less structured. I guess I've been trying to do it anyway, too. Anyway, I'll be back. Y'all have fun.